right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's get into that conversation on the war on graft. And like we mentioned earlier on, we'll be running some statistics and figures on the sides of your screen just to give you a general overview of where we are at as we speak. Kenya dropped a point, 27 in the Global Corruption Perception Index. So right now, Rwanda is ranked with 56 points, Tanzania 36 points, Kenya and Uganda 27 points, Burundi at 17 points. The ranking key is that 0 is perceived to be highly corrupt, 100 is very clean. So we are at 27. That score is below the global average, which is 43, and the sub-Saharan mean of 32. So either way, we are below standards. And this has been going on for the last 5 years. In fact, during the break, some told me it's the last 10 years. We've never gone beyond 29.
That's the highest we've hit.
That's the highest we've hit, 29, but we've ranged between 25 to 28. So it means in the last 10 years or so,
what have we been doing?
Efforts against graft have not done much. And that is where we start with, because what is the biggest impediment in the fight against graft then, Sam? Because that in itself shows that in the last 10 years, all these efforts have borne very little fruit. Is it that people are smarter now, or is it the same people who've been stealing, and they're stealing for long, and they're the ones in power as well, so it's very hard to catch up? How come in the last 10 years we haven't done much?
Well, Trevor, I think the first point to make is that you're dealing with a system.
Okay.
You know, and a system, sometimes we think that changes in government and leadership should ultimately change the system, which happens, but it requires leadership that is resolute about that. And I think, I'm sorry to say, we haven't quite received the kind of leadership that would push us over to, give us the kind of speed or velocity that we need to break away from this system. There are efforts, significant efforts that are to be lauded. Institutions have more resources in terms of money, in terms of people who have the capacity to do the work, but in terms of the political environment to make a mark, that has been a challenge. And I think if you want to look at it, you need to look at the reports of corruption, theft that are reported every day, and others that are not reported, against the recoveries, against the prosecutions and convictions, and the recoveries of assets. And you will see that they are very disproportionate. So our institutions are working hard, but they need to do a lot more to get us to a level where corruption does not pay.
So from where you stand, is this an institutional breakdown, or is it lack of leadership? Because we've seen a lot of pronouncements against corruption and very little action, or depending on where you stand, but also the institutions charged with fighting graft. So if the leadership says do this and they don't do it, where's the problem? Is it the institution or the leadership?
Let me put it this way. The silver bullet in the fight against corruption is prevention. It's not law enforcement. Law enforcement has a role to play, but that role that the former AG called a mortician's role is, in and of itself, is not going to take us where we need to be. And let me just be clear, because we've been calling for prosecutions and convictions and asset recoveries. These are important, but more importantly is how we change the psyche in public service and among the public, that corruption and unethical conduct are not tolerated, are not to be tolerated at all. So it's going to manifest itself not just in prosecutions, but also in, asking questions about who gets into office, what is their record, what is their ethical record, questions about when people are given public office, and the Auditor General presents all these reports saying that money cannot be accounted for. Does it really matter? When someone is involved in public browse, we were talking about school children the other day, what role models are we giving them? And that kind of Chapter 6 officer, state and public officer that we envisaged under our constitution is what I'm talking about from a preventive side of view, because you've got to build. You build an integrity framework. You build an integrity framework. And that building is a leadership question. It is about, looking at an institution, or a country for that matter, and looking at what works and what doesn't work, and incrementally working to make sure that you constrain the space for those who want to reap the public, so that they don't really have the breathing space to do it.
All right.
But I think you will agree with me that for the last decade and more, those people have thrived in this country.
They've thrived.
Yeah.
Mudhoni, you're in the Assets Recovery Agency. What is the biggest challenge you're facing? Because Kenyans think that you're not recovering assets fast enough. What is the problem there?
Thank you, Trevor. I think the first thing that we need to understand is that asset recovery is a process. It's not an event. First of all, you have the intelligence. And intelligence is undercover. It cannot be in the open. It has to be undercover, where a person is under investigation. Then you're investigating the assets, the financial. You're tracing the money trail. It's a long and tedious process, very complex and very challenging, because you go before a magistrate, through a police officer, seeking search and seizure warrants to be able to search. That's the first intelligence. You're looking at people's bank accounts, and you can't go into, I can't go into your bank account without a court order. So when I get the court order, I then ask the bank to give me your bank statements, which we then analyze. And analyzing, we usually find nothing in those accounts, but we find intelligence, which sometimes takes us to where the money could be hidden.
So someone is being investigated, but there's no money in the account?
Most of the times. In all these cases where you hear, oh, so-and-so is being prosecuted, you will not find the assets sitting, unless they're very stupid. And these are white-collar crime, and they're clever people, and they have lawyers advising them and transactions.
So where do they store this money that you're looking for?
No, mostly I think the money is in either in properties, either fixed assets or movable assets. That's where it is most of.
And that complements what Transparency International had, the research that they had done. Caroline, I'm coming to you in just a bit. $50 billion worth of stolen assets flow out of the African continent, $50 billion. So Caroline, having that in mind, and given that tomorrow is when we are marking the Africa Anti-Corruption Day with the theme of towards a common African position on asset recovery, will the war on corruption, especially here in Kenya, be won on asset recovery?
It can. I think we need to make corruption very expensive, if you ask me, Zinzi, because part of the reason that we use, like we've said here, that those who are involved in corruption seems to thrive. The reason is because then they get to use these assets or this wealth that they store away. But if you then put asset recovery in place and make corruption very expensive, both in terms of reputational costs, both in terms of career costs, we might win it. But having said that, I think for asset recovery to be successful, we then need to support, EACC, the Asset Recovery Agency, to then have the resources, the technical capacity. Like she says, there's a lot that goes into it. So how many of those people can they follow at any given time, given the resources that they have? And then we need to make it expensive for you, that it doesn't matter how long it takes. Whatever you steal will come for it, will recover it, and it will go back to the resources. So this has a spiral effect of making public and even private people realize that it's not worth it. And maybe it might act as a deterrent, as one of those preventive measures that he said. And then even in terms of reputation, we've said, especially around Chapter 6, the issue of vetting. Last year we saw one case where an officer didn't get the position, Kenya Power, because of the vetting process. Now, if you make it that expensive that if you're a public officer and you have been involved in corruption, you can't get another office as the Constitution envisaged, maybe it will act as a deterrent. If we then go a step further and say it's not enough that we are not allowing you into this office, whatever we've accused you of stealing, we are actually coming for it, then it stops being attractive.
All right. Judith, I mean, you're a senior attorney with the civil litigation and asset recovery at EACC. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Kenya has not one, but two fantastic legal recovery laws. That's the Proceeds of Crime and the Anti-Money Laundering Act. We have two fantastic legal asset recovery laws. But we are not seeing it move from law to from paper to the actual thing. Where is that missing link?
Zinzi, I think we have moved from paper to action. The law on proceeds of crime and anti-money laundering is what my senior Muthoni uses. And if you have been following the cases that she has been doing, NYS being one of them, she froze a lot of money that had been siphoned through the NYS, some vehicles which had been bought with that money. So I think there are huge efforts that are going towards asset recovery. When you look at the law that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption the Commission uses, that is the ASECA, the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, a lot has gone into it, and we have moved from paper to action. If you look at our statistics, from 2013 to now, as we speak, we have recovered over 11 billion worth of assets. Just recently, we handed over to the University of Nairobi their parcel of land, which has 5 houses, and it is worth 2 billion. That was in February. Just last month, again, we handed over to the Rift Valley Science and Technology Institute 100 acres of land worth 2 billion. I think these things should come out more, and Kenyans should appreciate that in as much as we may be ranked a bit low, there are great efforts that are going towards asset recovery.
And they're there, and you've already given us a fantastic example with the Nairobi University.
Yes.
But is there a way that we can see, or we can speed up this effort, so Kenyans can see individuals who are jailed, individuals who are economic crime thieves?
Culprits.
Yes, culprits. Kenyans would want to see, okay, so-and-so has been jailed.
For example, the land that you got back worth 2 billion shillings, who was trying to steal it, and have they been charged?
Now, what I should tell Kenyans this morning is that the Anti-Corruption Commission has actually embraced what we call alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. It is not always that we must go to court to recover assets. If you look at our constitution in Article 159, it has actually embraced alternative dispute resolution. When you come down to our Section 13 of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act, we are given that power to negotiate. Now, the person who had been illegally allocated that property of Nairobi University approached us and told us that, I want to return this asset, but you have to pardon.
So this was more of a voluntary...
It was a voluntary
giveaway.
Yes, a giveaway. We involved the office of the DPP because the file had already moved to the DPP. And they looked at the circumstances. Each case is looked at differently, and he agreed with us.
Okay. But should an individual have that option?
Yeah,
should that be an option on the table? It's like telling a murderer or a rapist, okay, choose which one suits you.
Yeah. If you can take a plea bargain now that we are closing in on you.
Should those options be on the table in the first place?
They should be. The world has moved. The world has moved, and I want my senior to comment on this.
Okay,
because as she explained, if I can finish, when you go to court, sometimes the cases are so protracted and so, this backlog, they are quite delayed. And the question is, if somebody has shown remorse, and you look at the circumstances of each case differently, even how that person acquired that public land also comes into play.
But are they showing remorse because you're closing in, or are they showing remorse because they know you're going to find out anyway?
And even Muthoni, as you answer that question, just to tie it in with the fact that our legal framework, should we also put corruption cases at the same level, the same toughness with the sentencing of an individual who is a murderer or a rapist? Because at the end of the day, when you steal, economic theft has a ripple effect. A school is not built, that hospital is not built, machines go missing, someone will fall sick. It's a ripple effect. So should we hold it to the same account that we hold a murderer or rapist?
Thank you. We have actually, to start with the last one, we have actually been fighting to increase the sentences in terms of corruption and economic crimes so that we make it very, very, very expensive and very painful for those who steal from the public coffers and those who make our citizens suffer. That has been our agenda, and we are engaged with the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament in terms of enhancing that framework so that we make it very difficult. However, it's a process. We have the task force that made certain recommendations. Institutions have been restructured a little bit. We had a lot of challenges in terms of court cases. I think I want to get to the real one. Why we opt for plea bargaining as opposed to prosecution. You know, prosecution is beyond reasonable doubt. The evidence has to be strong beyond reasonable doubt. That threshold is very hard to achieve in corruption cases because of the various players that are involved. If it is a land allocation, who is actually the one who actually committed that real act? Because there are very many players. There is a request, there is an allocation letter, there is all that, the title issue, and so it's very, very difficult. So we look at cases and see what case do we have as the state, because it's the state that goes to court through the Director of Public Prosecution. What evidence is in the file? What chances do we have? Then when we look at it, there is the plea bargaining regulations which we have in place. That's how we look at it. The person is first then given that option. Of course, there is the option that you can then look at before you even charge. You can charge and then enter into a plea bargaining with the suspect. They return the assets, and then probably you release them, you let them go off, but it has to be supervised by a court. So it's not something that we do out just like that. But the point, what we are trying to say is that in terms of recovering assets, what we use, and I like what you said, we have a very powerful law, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering. It's very powerful because it has two options. You can use the criminal confiscation, that is when you're charged, you are ultimately convicted, then the asset that you acquired either directly or indirectly is then confiscated and forfeited to the state.
So Muthoni, then how do you answer to comments that Kenyans make in regards to this? Fine, we can increase the sentence of these individuals, but the bail that they get, the amount. So you have an individual who was stolen, what, for example, 2 billion Kenyan shillings, and their bail is 500,000. What do you tell a Kenyan, a voter, a taxpayer?
What I would tell the taxpayer, I think there is a misunderstanding about the question of bail and the terms that are given. The right to bail is enshrined in the Constitution.
True.
You can only curtail it if there are circumstances that show that you're either going to interfere with the witnesses or you are likely to abscond.
Okay.
You know, you have to prove that. It's unlikely, because what's the point? The bail is given to you as a suspect because you're innocent until proved guilty. So that's a right, and I think Kenyans should understand that. Whether I'm charged with a murder, whether I'm charged with corruption, bail is a right. It should not, and it costs. It costs to Kenyans to keep me in the prison.
Okay.
So
And Muthoni, I'll come to you to tell us how much you're looking at, because she mentioned that you recovered assets worth about 11 billion, but how much are you investigating now, so that we know your performance? But Sam, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I wanted to make two comments.
Should we even have ADR on this issue?
Yeah, let me start with the question of bail, because I think it's one that we've not done justice to it. Because bail is not punishment, and Kenyans have to understand that. I think there is a sense in which when statements are made, even by some of our leaders, we are meant to think that bail is a punishment. Bail is supposed to secure the attendance to court over an accused person. And therefore it's not punishment. The moment we begin to elevate it to punishment, then we abuse the process. And I think that is important. What rather we should be focusing on is when a case has ended and there's a conviction, what is the sentence? What is the punishment that comes with it? That is where I would like Kenyans to shift their focus from. Not on bail, because you can actually be released on zero. Zero bail, a personal undertaking. And if you are released, and actually to be honest with you, I do think there are very many cases here that even bail is not necessary. I mean, a lot of our leaders here and a lot of Kenyans who are accused of corruption, actually not people who are likely to run away from the courts. They are likely to remain here. They have family, they have invested, so they actually, in many cases, there's no justification to use oppressive bail terms as a way of punishing them, because that will be abusing the process. I think on the question of ADR and plea bargaining, I think it's, in my view, it's necessary, because as Judith has explained, the whole idea of having the protracted case battles, they take long, they cost a lot. The cost of prosecuting a case, in fact, if you were to calculate it what the time of the judge, the prosecution, the investigation, you know, and everybody who is involved there, you might actually find that it is higher than what you get out of it in the end, even when you recover assets. But, you know, that's not the way we look at criminal law. But at the end of it, I think if we can recover assets without having to go to court, that is a plus, and I think I should commend our institutions for that kind of thing. And secondly also, Trevor, there's a time that it was extremely easy to get public assets in this country. Yeah, and some people found themselves with assets that they would rather get rid of. And that is happening. That is where we are having, you know, people coming forward. But there's also the element that they can see the signs of the times, that these things will catch up with them. And you don't want to spend your retirement years, you know, fighting battles in the courts.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a look at your feedback before we take a quick break. But I'm really interested in knowing how much the assets recovery are looking at, because if the nation 11 billion, is that 50% of what the target is, 10, 20? We'll come back to that in just a bit. Well, let's read some of your feedback on social media. Hashtag is Daybreak. Engineer Lazaro says politics based on ethnic mobilization is making fight against corruption too hard in most African countries, especially Kenya. System of the day can't be too harsh to some corrupt lords because of politics and fear of how the tribes would react.
All right, still on Twitter, hashtag Daybreak, that's your ticket into the conversation. Mzalendo Watch. They say...
That's her people.
Yes, and they say we would be opening up a Pandora's box, and as Kenyans, we need to be cautious about these constitutional reforms intending to achieve. Are they good for Kenyans or for the political class?
Well, that is what she mentioned earlier on during the newspaper review. But Francis Kigondu says there's too much noise in Kenya. Countries who manage to fight corruption in a very short time have had strong authoritarian governments. Democracies, even Western powers, took ages to bring the vice under control. Kenya's law is too lenient towards corruption.
All right, SMS 22422. That's our SMS line in case you want to send in a bit of a heftier response. Sir Nixon, you say doing away with corruption in Kenya is a very tall order. Honestly, you can get the goat if you look for it together with the one who ate it.
It's an interesting SMS there. Dr. Agutu from Kitusuru, right in Nairobi. The ultimate goal of corruption is absolute poverty by those who do not engage in it. All our institutions fighting graft are full of impediments of corruption. All investigators are happy to ask for bribes. We are totally lost on the war of corruption. The DCI, EACC, DPP all compromise thickets of corruption. Who will save Kenyans? What? you have a reaction to that? Yeah, Caroline, you want to react to that?
That last comment sounds too resigned, like we are resigned to our fate, which I don't think is the case. I think we are beginning to see some reactions, some actions, maybe not as fast as citizens would want us to move. And then even coming back especially to these ADR conversations, I think what Kenyans would be interested in hearing is, during that process, is there a way of also ensuring that the gains made from that corruption proceed are also recovered? Because it's not enough to return land 15 years later when I have used the land to probably make enough money as the value of that land over the 15 years. But I think we are making efforts. They might not be as fast as we would want to see. The conviction rates might not be as, especially for those involved in grand corruption, might not be as many as we would want to see. And coming back again to the asset recovery, maybe the issue is amounts recovered vis-a-vis the figures that we get to hear about in terms of corruption. And I think that's something that either Muthoni or Judith would be willing to delve into, so that we know the rates at which we are recovering this.
All right, and they'll delve into that right after the short break here on Daybreak. Keep your feedback coming on Citizen TV Kenya. Trevor Mbija Zinzike, hashtag Daybreak. We'll sample some of them at the end of the program. Stay with us.